The first thing they noticed was the box, not the way it was sealed with careful tape, not the neat label printed in two languages, not even the cold fog that clung to it like breath on glass. They noticed the hands holding it, small hands, dark skin, a delivery jacket a size too big at the shoulders, a chin lifted a little higher than it needed to be, like someone had learned to keep their face steady even when the room tried to bend it. The lobby of Kiyomori Tower smelled like polished stone and expensive air freshener. Soft music hid in the corners. A fountain whispered behind a wall of glass. People moved like they had nowhere to be late for, and right in the center of that quiet, a young black delivery girl stood with the temperature-controlled crate pressed to her ribs, while three men in suits stared at her like she was a smudge on a clean window. One of them sharp haircut, then Smile laughed under his breath. "You brought that here?" he said, like the idea was funny. The girl's eyes didn't flicker. She shifted her grip, feeling the cold bite through the plastic handle, and looked past him to the security gate where a red light blinked. Behind the glass doors, a small crowd had gathered. A gray-haired man in a navy coat spoke quickly into his phone. A woman with a badge that said facilities kept glancing at her watch. A younger assistant looked ready to cry. Someone said, "We don't have time for this." Someone else whispered, "The interpreter isn't answering." And then the gray-haired man turned, eyes wide with a kind of controlled panic, and snapped something in Japanese to the security guard. The guard blinked. "Sir, I what?" The girl took one small step forward and, in clear, steady Japanese that cut through the lobby like a bell, said, "Sumimasen, kono nimatsu wa riito shirai desu. Kono mama danki no nai tokoro nai oit wa itemasen." Excuse me. This package is temperature controlled. You can't leave it somewhere without power. The laughter stopped so fast it felt like someone had turned off the fountain. If you enjoy stories that feel real and hit deep, take a second to like and subscribe. The girl held the crate tighter as every head in the lobby turned toward her, and the question that hung in the air was simple and heavy. Who was she and why did she sound like she belonged in a room that had already decided she didn't? Her name was Yuri Mensa, and she had learned to move through the city like a shadow with a deadline. She was 17, the kind of 17 that didn't look like the movies. No slow mornings, no lazy afternoons, no extra money for mistakes. Her hair was pulled into a neat bun under her cap because loose strands got caught in helmet straps and made customers comment like her body was public property. Her knees carried old bruises from bike pedals and stair edges. Her hands smelled faintly of cardboard and citrus sanitizer because she washed them constantly, not from obsession, but because people treated delivery like dirty. The city she lived in had tall buildings that reflected the sky and small streets that swallowed light. It had people who looked for you when you wore a uniform and looked at you when you didn't want to be seen. Zuri worked for a small courier service with a plain logo and a strict rule. Deliver the package. Get the signature. Don't ask questions. Don't get involved. But her life had never been built on don't get involved. She lived with her mother, Ajoa, in a small apartment above a laundromat that hummed late into the night. The hallway always smelled like soap and heat. Their fridge made a clicking sound that came and went like a bad mood. When the power went out, the building manager took his time. When a pipe burst, he blamed the tenants. Joe worked long hours cleaning offices downtown, the same kind of buildings that had fountains in their lobbies. She came home with her shoes in her hand, her feet swollen, her back stiff, and her eyes still kind. "You ate?" she would ask, even when she was the one who hadn't. Zuri would shrug like it was nothing. "I grabbed something." Sometimes something was a bruised apple from a discount bin. Sometimes it was a rice ball she bought because it was cheap and kept her hands busy while she waited for the next order. Her mother had a quiet pride that made accepting help feel like stepping into cold water. She didn't complain much. She didn't ask neighbors for favors. She didn't want anyone thinking they owed anybody anything. Zuri inherited that pride, but her version had sharp edges. She wanted more than getting by, not in a dreamy way, in a practical way. She wanted rent paid before the reminder notice. She wanted her mother to sit down without wincing. She wanted to go to school without counting the days until her work shift. And she wanted, more than anything, to be treated like she was fully human no matter what jacket she wore. The Japanese came from a place nobody in her world understood at first. It started with a used book. One afternoon, when Zuri was 13, she had waited for her mother outside a community center where Joa sometimes picked up extra work. It was winter, and the wind crawled into her sleeves. To stay warm, she wandered into the center's small library corner 2 shelves, a broken chair, and a basket of donated books with pages that smelled like dust. She found a thin language guide with a cracked spine, Basic Japanese for Beginners. The cover had simple characters, neat and mysterious. She didn't know why she grabbed it. Maybe because it looked like a door. She took it home like it was something valuable. like it might break if she held it wrong. That night, while her mother soaked her feet in warm water, Siri sat at the table and traced the characters with a pencil, tongue between her teeth, and Joe had smiled without fully understanding. What is that? A language, Siri said. For what? Siri didn't have an answer that made sense. Not then. She just knew it made her mind feel clean, like the world had patterns, and she could learn them. She started with greetings, tiny phrases. Then she found free lessons online, watched videos late at night with the volume low. She practiced in whispers while she swept the kitchen. She wrote hiragana on receipts and taped them to the wall. When she got into high school, there was a Japanese club small, mostly kids whose parents could afford trips and tutors. Siri walked past the door for weeks before she stepped in. The first time she entered, the room went quiet. A girl with glossy hair looked her up and down. Are you lost? Siri's cheeks heated, but she kept her voice flat. I'm here for Japanese club. The teacher overseeing the club, MS Tanaka, had turned and smiled like she'd been waiting. Come in. Sit. What's your name? Siri. MS. Tanaka handed her a printed sheet without hesitation, as if Zuri belonged there by default. That single gesture, small and ordinary, stuck to Zuri's ribs like warmth. MS. Tanaka became a quiet anchor in Zuri's life. Not a savior, not a miracle, just a steady adult who noticed effort and treated it like something sacred. When Zuri stayed after club to ask questions, MS. Tanaka answered. When Zuri stumbled on pronunciation, MS. Tanaka corrected her gently. When Zuri admitted she couldn't afford the club's optional trip to a cultural festival across town, MS. Tanaka didn't pity her. She just found a way for Zuri to volunteer at the event so she could attend for free. You don't need permission to learn, MS. Tanaka told her once. Learning is not a luxury. Zuri held onto that sentence the way some people held onto prayer. By the time she was 16, Zuri could hold basic conversations. Not perfect, not fancy, but clear, functional. Real. She never imagined it would matter to anyone except herself. And then came the delivery job. It wasn't glamorous. It was speed and weather and hungry customers who acted like you were late even when you were early. Her supervisor, Mr. Duke, was a tired man with a constant cough and a clipboard that seemed fused to his hand. The first day Zuri showed up, he looked her over and said, You got a phone. You got legs. You can read. Yes. Then you can work. He liked efficiency. He liked people who didn't make problems. Do your route, he said. Don't get pulled into drama. People will try you. Don't argue. Don't prove anything. Just deliver. Zuri nodded like she agreed, but inside, something tightened, because her whole life, people had tried her. At the apartment building where a woman once demanded Zuri use the service elevator because of the smell, even though Zuri had showered that morning and her clothes were clean. At a fancy condo where a doorman said, Deliveries go around back, and when Zuri rode around back, the back entrance was locked and the same doorman acted annoyed like she was the problem. At a restaurant where a manager took the bag from her with 2 fingers and wiped his hands afterward like Zuri was contagious. She learned to swallow responses. She learned to keep her face blank. She learned to save her anger for pedaling harder. Still, there were moments when she couldn't help noticing the shape of unfairness. Like the day she delivered to a corporate office and watched a white courier in a different uniform be offered water and a chair while Zuri was told, Leave it on the floor. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself money mattered more than respect right now, but respect mattered. It always did. It just didn't pay rent. That morning at Kiyomori Tower, Zuri hadn't expected anything special. The job came through the courier app with a red alert label, urgent, temperature control, hand off only. Pickup was at a small medical logistics hub across town. The kind of place that smelled like alcohol wipes and humming refrigeration units. The crate had a digital display that showed the internal temperature. The staff member who handed it to her looked tense. This must get to Kiyomori Tower, he said. Suite 52B. Hand it to someone named Kenji Sato. He has a badge. Zuri nodded. What is it? The man hesitated, then decided she didn't need details. Just keep it cold. Zuri checked the seal. She checked the latch. She checked the temperature again. Outside, the winter air bit at her cheeks. She wrapped the insulated strap around her shoulder, feeling the weight settle. It wasn't just heavy, it was responsibility with corners. The ride to Kiyomori Tower was a test of patience. Traffic slowed everything. A bus blocked the bike lane. A car door swung open without warning, and she swerved, heart punching her ribs. A gust of wind shoved against her like an argument. When she finally reached the tower, she was 5 minutes early, breath visible, legs burning. She walked into the lobby and felt that immediate shift warm air, quiet wealth. Eyes that judge. She approached the front desk. I have an urgent delivery for Suite 52B, she said. Kenji Sato. The receptionist's smile stayed, but her eyes sharpened. Deliveries are usually scheduled through loading. It's temperature controlled, Zuri said. It has to be handed off. One of the men in suits nearby later she would learn his name was Graham Holt looked over and smirked. Like the sentence itself was cute. The receptionist tapped her keyboard. One moment. That moment stretched. The red light at the security gate blinked like a heartbeat. Behind it, people moved faster, voices rising. The gray-haired man in the navy coat appeared, speaking on his phone in Japanese, frustration leaking into his tone. Zuri recognized words, not all, but enough to catch the shape. Late. Problem. Cannot. Now. A facilities woman hurried over, whispering to the receptionist. Kanjit isn't here. The delegation is upstairs. The interpreter hasn't arrived. The receptionist's eyes flicked to Zuri, then away, as if Zuri didn't exist. Graham chuckled. This is what we're dealing with. A kid on a bike with a cooler box. Zuri heard him. Of course she did. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't turn. The gray-haired man ended his call and spoke again in Japanese, sharper this time. Zuri caught the phrase kaiken, dangerous. Jiken ga nai, no time. The security guard raised his hands helplessly. Sir, I'm sorry. I can't let anyone pass without clearance. The gray-haired man's face reddened. He snapped a string of Japanese that sounded like metal hitting metal. The guard blinked and looked at the receptionist. The receptionist looked at her screen like it might save her. The facilities woman whispered, "We need someone who understands him." The assistant near the elevator swallowed and said, "The interpreter is stuck. Flight delay. They said maybe an hour." An hour. Zuri looked down at the temperature display on the crate. It was stable. But time wasn't just about cold. It was about decisions. It was about the chain of people who had to do the right thing in the right order. The gray-haired man pointed at the crate and said something in Japanese that sounded like a question. Zuri stepped forward, heart thudding once, hard. She could feel the risk before she spoke. She could feel the boundary her supervisor had told her, deliver, don't get involved. But her mother's face flashed in her mind-tired eyes, gentle voice, the way she always said, if you can help without hurting yourself. Help. Zuri inhaled, and she answered the man in Japanese, politely, clearly, careful not to overreach. Yes, this is the package for Kenji Sato, she said. It must remain cold and be handed to an authorized person. Is there someone upstairs who can receive it? The gray-haired man froze like the floor shifted. His eyes narrowed not with suspicion, but with surprise, like he was trying to place a sound he didn't expect to hear in this lobby. Then he said, slower, and I wane hango ga hanasuru no ka. You speak Japanese. Zuri nodded once. Tsukoshi date. A little. Graham's smile faltered. The receptionist's fingers stopped moving. The gray-haired man turned to the others and said, in English now, why didn't anyone say we had someone who could translate? The facilities woman looked around, helpless. We didn't know. Zuri kept her posture straight. She wasn't here to be praised. She was here to deliver. The gray-haired man held out his hand, not to take the crate, but to stop the chaos. My name is Hiroshi Kanda, he said. I'm responsible for the visiting engineering team. The package, what is it? Zuri shook her head. I wasn't told, but it's urgent. Hiroshi's face tightened. He said something in Japanese, calmer now, to the assistant. The assistant didn't understand. Zuri translated softly. He needs to get this upstairs to Suite 52B, but security needs clearance. The receptionist finally cleared her throat. I can call upstairs. Hiroshi leaned forward and said in Japanese again, faster, and Zuri caught enough to translate the core. Call now. Tell them I said to approve temporary escort. This is critical. The receptionist nodded quickly, suddenly eager. Zuri's phone buzzed in her pocket with a notification from the courier app. Delivery timer, 12 minutes remaining. Her stomach tightened. If she missed the handoff window, she would get flagged. Too many flags and you lost good jobs. You got pushed to low-paying routes. But if she did nothing, this crate might sit in a lobby while people argued about procedures. Hiroshi looked at her, as if he could see the calculation behind her eyes. I will take responsibility, he said, careful English. If you come, you can help us communicate. Zuri hesitated. I'm not authorized. I'm just the courier. Hiroshi nodded. Yes, but you're the only bridge we have right now. A bridge. Zuri swallowed and glanced at the security guard. The guard looked uncertain, caught between rules and urgency. Graham scoffed softly. This is ridiculous. Zuri's cheeks warmed, but she didn't look at him. The receptionist received a call, listened, nodded repeatedly, then said, okay, security will escort her. Temporary clearance. The gate light turned green. Zuri stepped through, the crate heavy. The air suddenly different, like she had crossed an invisible line. The elevator ride-up was quiet except for the faint whir of machinery in the walls and Zuri's own breathing. The security guard, a broad man named Malik, stood beside her. He looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. You speak Japanese? He asked under his breath. A bit, Zuri said. How? Zuri shrugged, eyes on the floor indicator. I learned. Malik nodded like that was enough. When the doors opened on the 52nd floor, the hallway was bright and cold, lit by clean white lights. A carpet muted footsteps. The air smelled like coffee and printer paper. Suite 52B wasn't a home. It was a conference space, glass walls, long table, screens mounted like eyes. Inside, a small group of Japanese engineers stood around a metal case and a laptop. Their expressions were tight. One of them, younger than the rest, held a phone with the translation app open. The app's robotic voice spoke English in strange, broken pieces. A woman and a Blazer local staff stood on the other side, looking exhausted. When Hiroshi entered, the room turned toward him at once. Okurite, someone said. Wait, Hiroshi answered quickly. Zuri caught the edge of guilt in his tone. Then he gestured toward Zuri, and every gaze landed on her. Zuri felt it like a spotlight. Hiroshi said, Kono ko wanihango ga wakaru, Tasuki moraru. This girl understands Japanese. She can help. The younger engineer blinked hard, then bowed slightly toward Zuri. Hondo nai. Really? Zuri nodded, keeping her voice steady. Hi, Gambarimasu. Yes, I'll do my best. She set the crate on the table carefully, like it was fragile, like it held something alive. Hiroshi asked Zuri to translate as they opened the case. Inside was a sealed container with warning labels. Not fear warnings, precision warnings. Temperature sensitive. Handle with care. The local staff woman exhaled shakily. What is it? Zuri listened as the engineer spoke. Then she said, they are calling it a calibration sample. It's for a machine they brought. Without it, they can't finish setup, and the machine is needed today. Needed for what? The woman asked. Hiroshi's jaw tightened. He answered in Japanese, and Zuri felt the weight of his words. She translated, voice softer. It's for a medical device demonstration. A hospital team is watching remotely. If it fails, the project could be delayed for months. The local staff woman pressed her fingers to her forehead. Of course it is. The younger engineer opened his laptop, hands trembling slightly. He typed fast, then stopped, frustrated. He spoke rapidly in Japanese, pointing at the screen. Zuri leaned closer and listened. He says, Zuri began, then paused as the words formed. The system is locked in safety mode. It needs a code, but the instructions were sent to the interpreter. Hiroshi swore quietly in Japanese, not a profanity, but a sharp exhale of frustration. Zuri looked around, taking in the scene. People in suits, people with titles, people with authority, and yet the room was stuck because a single link in the chain was missing. Zuri's mind moved the way it did when she learned new grammar pattern. Logic. Step. She said, Can I see the manual? The local staff woman blinked. Manual. The younger engineer held up a thick folder with Japanese text. He hesitated like he wasn't sure she could read it. Zuri held out her hand. He placed it in her palm. The paper smelled like toner. The pages were thin and crisp. Zuri flipped through, eye scanning. She didn't understand every technical word, but she recognized structure, headings, caution symbols, step numbers. She found a section labeled Safety, LOCK, Chinese letter, Safety lock release. Her finger traced the steps. Step 1. Confirm temperature range. Step 2. Verify seal. Step 3. Enter emergency release sequence. Zuri's heart beat faster, not from fear, but from focus. She translated the steps, slowly, carefully, checking with the engineer's face for confirmation. The engineer nodded rapidly, relief flooding his expression. They followed the procedure. The device beeped once, then again. The screen changed. The local staff woman let out a breath she'd been holding for hours. Hiroshi's shoulders dropped slightly, like a heavy coat sliding down. For a moment, the room felt lighter, and then, just as the tension eased, Zuri's phone buzzed again. A message from Mr. Dube, where are you? Why no signature yet? Zuri's stomach sank. She stared at the screen, thumb hovering. She could explain, but explanations didn't matter in courier work. Only time stamps did. She typed quickly, urgent handoff delay. Security escort will complete soon. The reply came almost instantly. Not your job to fix their mess. Get signature and leave. Zuri swallowed. She looked up at the engineers and the staff, at the device now waking up, at Hiroshi's tight face. The crate had been delivered, but the problem wasn't finished. Not yet. They still needed to complete the calibration. They still needed to communicate with the hospital team on the call. The interpreter still wasn't here. Hiroshi turned to Zuri and asked, in Japanese, Mosuko shitetsu dat moraru. Can you help a little longer? That was the boundary. Zuri could feel it like a line on the floor. She was a courier, not a translator, not staff, not an employee of the tower. Every minute she stayed was a minute she wasn't earning. Every minute risked her job. And yet, leaving now felt like walking away from someone standing on the edge of something. Zuri hesitated, then said, "Just a little, but I need a signature first." Hiroshi nodded quickly. He signed the digital pad with his name and badge number, hands still slightly shaking. Zuri's delivery timer stopped flashing, but she didn't leave. They started the calibration process. The engineers spoke in quick bursts, pointing at graphs and numbers. The hospital team's video call came through on the screen faces in a sterile room, watching with expectation. A doctor on the call spoke English, asking questions. Hiroshi answered. Then the engineers spoke Japanese, and Zuri translated in short, clean phrases. Her throat got dry. The room's air felt too cool. The lights hummed faintly overhead. She kept going anyway. At first, people treated her like a tool, useful, temporary. Then, little by little, they started looking at her like a person. The younger engineer, his name was Ren Takahashi. She learned, offered her a bottle of water without making a big deal about it. "Arigato," she said, accepting it. Ren's eyes widened slightly, then softened. "Doya shimashite," he said. "You're welcome." The local staff woman, whose name was Dana, muttered, "Where did you come from?" Zuri kept her eyes on the manual. "The street," she said simply. Dana stared at her, then shook her head like the world didn't make sense. By the time the calibration finished and the device displayed a green confirmation symbol, the room erupted not with cheers, but with that kind of quiet relief professionals have when disaster is avoided. Hiroshi bowed toward the screen, thanking the hospital team. Then he turned to Zuri and bowed to her too. "Arigato," he said, voice thick. "You saved us." Zuri's cheeks warmed. "I just translated." Hiroshi shook his head. "No, you saw what we needed. You stayed. That is not just." Ren looked at her like she was something rare. Dana looked at her like she had misjudged her so badly it hurt. And then, because the world never let relief last long, the door opened. Graham Holt walked in with two other executives, smiling like he owned the air. "Well," Graham said loudly, "I heard there was some confusion. Is it handled?" Hiroshi's face tightened. Ren's hands clenched. Dana straightened, trying to regain control. Zuri stood near the table with her delivery jacket still on, hands wrapped around her empty water bottle. Graham's eyes flicked to her. "Oh, you're still here." The way he said it made still sound like an insult. Hiroshi spoke in careful English. "Yes, she helped us communicate." Graham laughed, short and dismissive. "The delivery girl helped you communicate." Zuri felt something sharp rise in her chest. Not anger, exactly. Something older, something that had been swallowing words for years. Hiroshi's voice grew colder. "Yes, and without her, we would have failed." Graham waved a hand like it didn't matter. "Let's be real. We have systems for this." Ren spoke suddenly in Japanese, too fast for Dana to catch, frustration spilling out. Zuri understood enough to feel the heat, disrespect, ignorance, dangerous arrogance. Graham glanced at Ren and smirked. "See, that's why we need real interpreters." Zuri's mouth went dry, and then, without planning to, she did something that would change her day and maybe her life. She stepped forward and addressed Graham in Japanese, her voice calm but edged with steel. "Anata wa ma kono timo sonke shida mason," she said. "You don't respect this team right now." Graham blinked, thrown off. "What did you just say?" Zuri switched to English, steady. "I said you're not respecting them, and you almost cost them the entire project because you were busy laughing instead of clearing a gate." The room went so still the hum of the light sounded louder. Dana's eyes widened. Hiroshi inhaled sharply. Ren stared at Zuri like she had just stepped out of a shadow into fire. Graham's face hardened. "Excuse me?" Zuri's hands shook slightly, but she kept them at her sides. "You laughed at me in the lobby, but this wasn't about me. This was about an urgent delivery and a team with no interpreter. You can be annoyed, but you can't be careless." Graham stepped closer, voice low, threatening without being loud. "You're a courier. You don't lecture executives." That sentence was meant to put her back in her place. Zuri felt the boundary again. This time, she crossed it, because pride was a tricky thing. It could protect you, and it could ruin you. She said, "Then act like an executive. Solve problems. Don't create them." Graham's smile returned, but it was sharp now. "Security." He called toward the door. "Escort her out." Malik appeared in the doorway, uncertain. Dana said quickly, "Wait." Graham cut her off. "She's done here." Zuri's heart pounded. She looked at Hiroshi, searching his face for something support, permission, anything. Hiroshi's expression was conflicted. He respected her. She could feel it. But he also lived in a world of contracts and politics and consequences. He didn't move fast enough. Malik stepped towards Zuri. "Come on," he murmured, regret in his eyes. "I'm sorry." Zuri swallowed hard and nodded once. She picked up her helmet from the chair and walked out with her head high, even though her throat burned. In the elevator down, the silence felt heavy. Mala cleared his throat. You shouldn't have. I know, Zuri said, voice tight. But even as she said it, part of her didn't regret it. She regretted that she had to. Outside, the cold slapped her face. She mounted her bike with stiff hands and pedaled away from the tower, the city swallowing her again. Her phone buzzed. Mister. Dube client complained. You argued. You are suspended 1 week. Zuri's vision blurred for a second. Suspended meant no pay. No pay meant rent stress. No pay meant her mother's feet in cold water again. Eyes tired, trying not to show fear. Zuri pulled over near a bus stop, breath coming fast, and stared at the message until the letters stopped swimming. She wanted to throw her phone. She wanted to scream. Instead, she pressed her forehead against the cold metal of the bike handlebar and breathed slowly until her lungs stopped panicking. Then she rode home like nothing happened. That evening, Adjoa stood at the stove stirring a pot of beans, steam rising into her face. The kitchen light flickered once, then steadied. The apartment felt small, like the walls listened. How was work? Adjoa asked. Zuri hesitated. Her mother didn't like lies, but she also didn't like burdens. Zuri set her bag down slowly. I got suspended. The spoon stopped moving. Adjoa turned, eyes sharp with concern. Why? Zuri swallowed. I spoke up. I crossed the line. Adjoa stared at her daughter's face like she was reading a letter. Then she sighed, the sound deep and tired. Zuri, I know, Zuri said quickly. I know. I should have just left. Adjoa set the spoon down and wiped her hands on a towel. She didn't yell. That would have been easier. Instead, she said softly, you are strong, but strength is not always loud. Zuri's eyes stung. He was laughing at me, at them, like we were nothing. Adjoa nodded slowly. The world will laugh sometimes, not because you are funny, because they are afraid of what they don't understand. Zuri shook her head, frustration spilling. So I should just take it. Adjoa's gaze held hers. No, but you must choose your moment, and you must protect your future while you protect your pride. Zuri looked down at her hands, fingers still carrying the faint smell of sanitizer. I messed up, she whispered. Adjoa stepped closer and placed a hand on her shoulder. Her palm was warm, rough from work. You made a choice, Adjoa said. Choices have costs. Now you learn how to pay the cost without breaking. That night, Zuri lay in bed listening to the laundromat machines thump below, the rhythm like a heartbeat through the floor. Suspended. 1 week. She counted bills in her head until numbers tangled with shame. Then her phone buzzed again, an unknown number. She stared at it, hesitating, then answered. Hello? A calm voice replied, accented but clear. Is this Zuri Mensah? Yes. This is Dana Reeves, facilities coordinator at Kiyomori Tower. Zuri sat up, heart pounding again. Okay. There was a pause. Dana's voice softened. I wanted to say I am sorry for how today went. Zuri didn't know what to say. Apologies from people like Dana didn't happen often. Dana continued, I also wanted to tell you something. Mr. Holt is not happy, but Mr. Kanda insisted we document what actually happened. He said you were essential. Zuri's throat tightened. That doesn't change my suspension. I know, Dana said quietly, and I'm not calling to promise anything. I'm calling because the visiting team asked about you. Zuri blinked. Asked about me? Yes, especially Ren Takahashi. He wanted to know your name. He said you read the manual. He said you translated under pressure. He said you kept people from making a mistake. Zuri's fingers curled into her blanket. Why does that matter? Dana exhaled. Because tomorrow there's a follow-up meeting. The interpreter still might not make it. And Mr. Kanda asked if you'd be willing to come paid just for 1 hour, not as a courier, as language support. Zuri's mind went blank for a second. Paid, not tips, not per delivery. Paid to speak. I'm not a professional, Zuri said carefully. Dana's voice stayed practical. Neither is our situation right now. You'd be helping. But here's the boundary. If you agree, you follow instructions. No confronting executives. No arguing. You translate only. If someone disrespects you, you tell me or Mr. Kanda, not them. Zuri swallowed. The boundary was clear. Fair. Real. Adjoa's words echoed. Choose your moment. Protect your future. Zuri closed her eyes. How much? Dana named an amount that made Zuri's chest tighten. It wasn't rich money, but it was rent help money. I'll do it, Zuri said, voice steady. 1 hour. Good, Dana said, relief slipping through. Bring ID. Wear whatever you're comfortable in. We'll issue a visitor badge. When the call ended, Zuri sat in the dark, heart racing, and whispered, almost to herself, okay, don't mess this up. The next morning, She didn't wear the delivery jacket. She wore a clean sweater her mother had mended at the elbow and black pants that fit properly. She tied her hair back the same way, neat, practical. She looked at herself in the mirror and tried to see what other people might see. Not a delivery girl, just a girl. Ajoa watched from the doorway, arms folded. You will go? Zuri nodded. Ajoa stepped forward and adjusted Zuri's collar with gentle fingers. Remember your boundary. I will, Zuri said. Ajoa's eyes softened. And remember, you deserve respect without fighting for it. But if the world makes you fight, fight wisely. Zuri nodded again, then left with her stomach fluttering like a trapped bird. Kiyomori Tower looked the same from the outside glass in height and quiet confidence. But when Zuri walked into the lobby this time, something had shifted. The receptionist looked up and didn't hesitate. Zuri Mensa? Zuri nodded. Your badge is ready. A visitor badge slid across the counter toward her. It had her name printed clearly, not courier, not delivery. Her name. Malik appeared near the gate and gave her a small nod, like a silent apology. Dana met her in the lobby, clipboard in hand, but her eyes were less guarded than yesterday. Thank you for coming, Dana said. We're going straight up. Mister, Candid is waiting. Zuri followed, hands slightly damp, heart steadying with each step. On the elevator, Dana glanced at her. You okay? Zuri swallowed. I'm okay. Dana nodded. Good. Just remember, you're here because you have a skill they need. Upstairs. The conference room was quieter than yesterday, but the tension still lived in the corners. Hiroshi stood near the screen, speaking softly with Ren and another engineer. When he saw Zuri, his face softened with relief. He bowed slightly. Kaikuri arigato, he said. Thank you for coming. Zuri bowed back, awkward but respectful. Doeshimashai. Ren stepped forward, eyes bright. He bowed too, deeper than Hiroshi's, and said, Kino wa honto nai arigato, and atawasu gaketa. Yesterday, thank you. You were amazing. Zuri's cheeks warmed. I just did what I could. Ren smiled faintly. That is enough. Dana cleared her throat. Okay, meeting starts in 5. Quick reminder, Zuri is here as language support. Treat her like staff. Ren nodded. Hiroshi nodded. A door opened again, and Graham Holt walked in. He wore the same kind of suit, the same confident posture, but his eyes flicked to Zuri and tightened. For a moment, Zuri felt yesterday's heat rise in her chest. Then she remembered the boundary. Translate only. If disrespected, report it. Don't fight. Graham looked at Dana. She's back. Dana's voice was cool. Yes, she's contracted for this meeting. Graham scoffed softly and walked to his seat without addressing Zuri again. Zuri exhaled slowly through her nose. The meeting began. There were slides, technical terms, schedules. Ren spoke in Japanese, and Zuri translated into clear English. Graham asked pointed questions in English, and Zuri translated them into Japanese without adding emotion. At first, her voice shook slightly. Then it steadied. She focused on accuracy, tone, respect. She was careful. She didn't show off. She didn't try to impress. She simply did the job. And slowly, the room started moving smoothly, like a machine finally aligned. Halfway through, a new problem surfaced. A safety compliance document required for the hospital demonstration had a section that needed immediate clarification. The Japanese version and English version didn't match perfectly. The difference was small, but in official work, small differences became big disasters. Graham leaned back and said, We can't proceed if this isn't consistent. Hiroshi's face tightened. Ren's brows pulled together. Dana whispered, We don't have time for legal review. Zuri leaned forward, eyes scanning both documents. She noticed a phrase that looked familiar, something she had seen in her manual last night. Shiujo no chiui, usage precautions. In the English document, it had been translated as optional guidance, but the Japanese phrasing carried more weight, closer to mandatory caution. Zuri cleared her throat gently. May I point something out? Dana glanced at her. Yes. Zuri spoke carefully. The Japanese phrase here implies stronger obligation than the English translation. If the hospital interprets it as optional, they might treat a safety step as flexible. That could cause compliance issues. The room went still. Hiroshi's eyes narrowed, impressed. Ren leaned closer, reading. Graham frowned. Are you sure? Zuri nodded. Yes, it's subtle, but it matters. Ren spoke quickly in Japanese, confirming her interpretation. Hiroshi nodded. Dana exhaled sharply. So we correct the English version and rescind? Hiroshi answered, and Zuri translated. Yes, we'll mark it as mandatory precaution. Graham's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. They updated the document in real time. The hospital team received the corrected version. The demonstration stayed on schedule. No drama, no shouting, just quiet competence. When the meeting ended, Hiroshi bowed to Zuri again, deeper than before. You protected us, he said in English, voice sincere. not by fighting, by being precise. Zuri felt her throat tighten. I learned. Ren stepped forward and held out a small card. His name was printed on it, along with contact information. He hesitated, then said in careful English, "If you want, there is a scholarship program for language and technical support. People like you." Zuri blinked. People like me? Ren nodded, eyes earnest. People who work hard, who learn alone, who do not give up. Zuri's fingers trembled slightly as she took the card. Dana watched, expression thoughtful, then said, "I'll make sure you're paid today. And for what it's worth, you were right yesterday." Zuri's chest tightened. She didn't know if she wanted vindication or peace. Maybe both. She simply nodded. "Thank you." On her way out, Malik at security gave her a small smile. "Look at you," he murmured. Zuri walked through the lobby with her head high, not in defiance, but in quiet certainty. Outside, the cold air felt different now, not kinder, just honest. She rode home with Ren's card in her pocket and a strange new weight in her chest, a weight that wasn't burden, but possibility. Still, possibility didn't erase reality. Mr. Dube's suspension stood, and the courier company didn't care about Japanese or corporate meetings. They cared about timestamps and complaints. Zuri returned to work a week later, delivery jacket back on, routes back to normal. But something in her head changed. She didn't take every insult like a tax she had to pay. She didn't lash out either. She practiced boundaries like a new language. When a customer snapped at her, she kept her voice calm and ended the interaction quickly. When a doorman tried to send her around back unnecessarily, she asked politely for policy, and if they couldn't provide it, she waited in the front quiet, patient, immovable. And when she felt anger rise, she remembered Ajoa's voice, "Fight wisely." Then, a month later, a letter arrived, not an email, not a text, a physical envelope with clean edges and her name spelled correctly. Her hand shook as she opened it. It was from the scholarship program Ren had mentioned, an initiative connected to a local technical institute that supported bilingual students for roles in translation and technical liaison work. She had been nominated by a Japanese engineer she'd met for one chaotic day. Zuri read the letter twice, then three times, as if the words might change. The program offered training, mentorship, and a stipend. Not a miracle, not a free ride. It required grades, attendance, evaluations, but it was a path, a real one. That night, Ajoa sat at the small kitchen table while Zuri placed the letter in front of her like an offering. Ajoa read slowly, lips moving silently. When she finished, she looked up, eyes shining in a way Zuri hadn't seen in a long time. "You did this," Ajoa whispered. Zuri shook her head. "I didn't, I just..." Ajoa reached across the table and took Zuri's hand. Her fingers were warm, steady. "You learned," Ajoa said. "You stayed kind. You stayed strong. That is not small." Zuri's throat tightened. "I'd almost ruined it by talking back." Ajoa nodded. "Yes, and then you learned the boundary." Zuri smiled faintly through the sting in her eyes. "I'm still learning." Months passed. Zuri balanced school, courier shifts, and program training. It wasn't easy. Her days were measured in minutes. Her sleep came in short stretches. Her legs ached constantly. But there was something new in her fatigue now. Purpose. She learned technical vocabulary and Japanese words that felt sharp and precise. She practiced formal speech patterns. She learned how to speak in meetings without shrinking. She learned how to say "I don't know" without shame and "I need clarification" without apology. She also learned the harder things, how to accept help without feeling weak. The program assigned her a mentor, a calm woman named Dr. Sato, who had once been the only bilingual liaison in her own workplace. Dr. Sato didn't treat Zuri like a project. She treated her like a professional in training. "You have talent," Dr. Sato said once, "but talent is not enough. Consistency will save you." Zuri nodded, taking notes like her life depended on it because it did. One afternoon, near the end of her first semester, Dana called again. Her voice sounded different, now less rushed, more certain. "Zuri," Dana said, "I don't know if you remember Mr. Holt." Zuri's stomach tightened. "I remember." Dana exhaled. "There's another crisis. Different kind. The visiting team is back for a follow-up, and the new interpreter had a medical emergency. We need a liaison now, someone who understands technical and language nuance." Zuri's heartbeat sped up. "I'm still training." Dana's voice stayed firm. "We're not asking you to be perfect. We're asking you to be present. You will be paid, and you will have support, Doctor. Sato will be on standby by phone if needed." Zuri closed her eyes for a moment. This was the echo of the opening moment. A lobby, a crisis, people who didn't expect her to belong. But this time, she wasn't walking in as a courier with a crate. She was walking in as herself, with a skill she had built on purpose. "I'll come," Zuri said. The next day, she entered Kiyomori Tower wearing a simple blazer borrowed from the program's closet. her hair still neat, her posture grounded. She carried a small folder and a pen. The lobby smelled the same polished stone, expensive air. The fountain still whispered. The receptionist smiled and said, "Good morning, MS. Mensa. MS. Mensa." Zuri's chest tightened in a strange, quiet way. She walked through security without hesitation. Upstairs, the conference room buzzed with tension. The Japanese team sat on one side, local executives on the other. A new hospital partner was on the screen, impatient. Papers were scattered. Someone's coffee had spilled and been wiped too quickly, leaving a faint stain. Hiroshi stood and bowed when Zuri entered. Ren's eyes lit with relief, and then Graham Holt looked up. He froze. For a moment, the old smirk tried to form, out of habit. Then it faded, because now, Zuri wasn't in a delivery jacket. Now, she had a badge that read, Technical Liaison, Language Support. She took her seat calmly and opened her folder. The meeting began. A miscommunication about timelines threatened the partnership. A technical requirement had been misunderstood. The hospital team thought the device would be installed in weeks. The engineers knew it would take months. Voices rose. Blame tried to find a target. Zuri listened. She didn't rush to speak. She waited until the pattern revealed itself, the gap between intention and interpretation. Then she spoke, not loudly, not dramatically, clearly, in Japanese. She addressed the engineers respectfully, summarizing the hospital's concerns. In English, she'd addressed the executives and the hospital team, translating the engineers' limitations without making them sound incompetent. She'd also set boundaries. "We need to separate what was promised from what was assumed," she said, voice calm. "Let's confirm the written timeline, then clarify what's flexible and what isn't." The room quieted slightly, drawn toward order. Graham attempted to cut in with a sharp comment, but Zuri looked at him calmly and said, "One moment, please. Let's finish this point." He blinked, caught off guard, and then slowly he nodded and leaned back. Zuri kept going. She asked questions that created clarity instead of conflict. She repeated critical points to ensure everyone heard the same thing. She summarized decisions aloud so they became real. When the hospital team expressed frustration, Zuri didn't defend anyone. She'd acknowledge, "I understand why this feels sudden," she said. "The goal now is to leave this meeting with the same expectations on both sides." An hour later, the tension had softened into a plan. Not perfect, not magical, but workable. The hospital team agreed to adjusted timelines with specific milestones. The engineers agreed to additional documentation and training sessions. The executives agreed to allocate resources properly instead of pretending urgency could replace preparation. Hiroshi bowed toward Yuri when it ended. Ren's shoulders sagged with relief. Dana exhaled like she had been holding her breath all morning. And Graham Holt, who had laughed in the lobby, stood. He cleared his throat. The room went quiet, waiting for whatever he would do. Graham looked at Zuri. His voice was measured, controlled, but there was something different in it now, something like humility struggling to show itself. "MS. Mensa," he said. "Thank you. That was excellent." Zuri met his eyes. She didn't smile triumphantly. She didn't gloat. She simply nodded once, the way you nod at someone when you accept a fact without needing it to feed you. "Thank you," she said calmly. "I'm glad we solved it." Graham hesitated, then added, quietly, "And I was wrong before." There it was, not an apology wrapped in drama, not a public performance, just a sentence. Zuri felt her chest tighten, not with victory, but with something like release. She nodded again. Okay. Because she had learned something important. She didn't need to squeeze the world for respect. She needed to build her life until respect had to meet her where she stood. After the meeting, Ren walked with her to the elevator. He held his hands behind his back like he was trying to contain excitement. "You are different now," he said softly in Japanese. Zuri smiled faintly. "I'm still me." Ren shook his head. "No, you are you plus what you built." Zuri looked down at her badge, then back up at him. "What happens next?" she asked, half to him, half to herself. Ren smiled. "Next is more learning, more work, more doors." Zuri exhaled slowly. The elevator doors opened, and the lobby waited below polished stone. Quiet music, fountain whisper, the same space that had once tried to shrink her. When she stepped out, she noticed something small. A young courier in a delivery jacket stood near the desk, holding a box, eyes wary. People around him barely looked up. The receptionist was busy. A man in a suit sighed dramatically, impatient. Zuri paused. The courier's hands tightened on the box. His chin lifted just a little, like he was bracing. Zuri walked toward him and said softly, "Hey, you good?" The courier blinked, surprised to be addressed like a person. "Yeah," he murmured. "Just waiting." Zuri nodded and glanced at the receptionist. "Who's your delivery for?" He told her. Zuri stepped to the desk and spoke clearly, politely. with a calm confidence that didn't ask permission. Hi, he has a handoff delivery for Suite 31A. It's time sensitive. Can we clear him through? The receptionist looked up, blinked, then nodded quickly. Yes, of course. The gate light turned green. The courier stared at Zuri like she had performed magic. Zuri smiled faintly. Go ahead, she said. You're doing your job. He swallowed, then nodded and walked through. Zuri watched him disappear into the building's inner corridors, and she felt something warm settle in her chest. Belonging didn't always come from being invited into the room. Sometimes it came from holding the door open for someone else. Outside, the winter air was sharp, but the sun was out, low and pale. Light bounced off glass and painted the sidewalk in soft gold. Zuri stepped into it and inhaled. For the first time in a long time, her breath didn't feel like she was running from something. It felt like she was moving toward something. She pulled her phone from her pocket and typed a message to her mother. Meeting went well. I'm coming home. We'll eat together. She hit send. Then she walked forward. The city still loud, still unfair in places, still full of people who would laugh too quickly at what they didn't understand. But Zuri knew something now. She wasn't asking the world to see her. She was building a life so clear, so grounded, so earned, that sooner or later the world would have to.